president of her grain marketing firm, Brook Grain, LLC. And Erica brings to our club a wealth of Rotary experience, having been a charter member of the Edina, thank you, Edina, Minnesota Morningside Club and the Minneapolis University Rotary Club, where she was a past president. She also served 3 years as assistant governor of District 5950. Erica and her wife Patience moved to Louisville in 2017 as a result of the incredible growth of the bourbon and rye whiskey industry. And following in her father's footsteps, Erica has been supplying rye to distilleries since 1978. Erica Fields. And now Steve Rungworth. After a 32-year career with GE Lighting in Cleveland, Steve retired 5 years ago as a global engineering executive, and with his wife Kathleen, they relocated to our fair city in order to be closer to family. He is an active volunteer with Leadership Louisville's Encore program, Kentucky Refugee Ministries, and the Parklands of Floyd's Fork. Steve enjoys hiking, bicycling, and traveling. Steve Rungworth. Today's speaker is somebody that I've admired for years, and I don't have the pleasure of introducing her, but if you're a fan of sports or athletic competition, you know that in certain cases, a person's strength of character, physical strength, emotional strength, spiritual strength is put to the test, and when that person, that contestant, that athlete comes out on the other side, it really is cause not just for that person to celebrate, but all of us who have been spectating and learning from. And I just want to say that as a huge sports fan, Tori, when you whooped the ocean and you crossed the Atlantic Ocean, that was something that I consider my life to be one of the top 3 athletic achievements. You're much more, though, than a champion on the ocean. And to share with us her story, no better person to introduce her than her husband, Mac. Mac has been a Rotarian, service above self, for, get this, and he's only 59 years old. So get this, for 45 years, Mac has been a Rotarian. Mac.
I'm glad Tony made the introduction. That was good. What I was going to just tell you briefly, it's because of Rotary that Tori and I are together. In December, she was in 1998, after her unsuccessful trial of the Atlantic, the first go-round, she came to speak at Rotary. And I was standing in the back of the room, and she came and walked up to me, and I was wearing a tweed coat, button-down shirt, tie, khakis, and green rubber garden clogs. So she thought, oh, well, and she walked up to me and said, so what are you doing on January the 8th? And I said, well, nothing. What's going on? She said, stand here. And she went up to the podium, got an invitation, and it was Mayor Armstrong's inaugural ball when he became mayor, after Jerry had to leave because of term limits. And she used and said, I'm tired of dating testosterone and gorilla dust. Would you take me to this thing? And I said, for a pickup line, guys, I don't know. But I said, sure, I'll get 2 tickets. And she said, no, I'll buy my own. So we went to the event, and she was at one table, and I was at another table. But since that night, we've been together ever since. Love you.
He got it mostly right, you know, spouses. So first I need to explain the title of my speech being If I Ruled the World. A month ago, the Rotary needed a topic for my speech, and Spalding was in its run-up to commencement, and my poor assistant kept saying, Tori, they need a topic. And I was like, can I tell them, heck if I know is my topic? And they said no, and so I came up with If I Ruled the World, because I figured that's a good placeholder, and I could, adapt from there. And so here I am. I sat down to write the speech last week, and I was like, ruh-roh, if I ruled the world, that's kind of big. So on Monday, I was speaking with the Governor Scholars. For the last 21 years, I've spoken to all 3 campuses of the Governor Scholars. It's my favorite event. I tell them all my best stories. I spend an hour. I talk about climbing mountains, skiing to the South Pole, rowing across the ocean. I tell them all those things don't matter, that the real adventures occur here in civilization, and that the endurance and the persistence and the resourcefulness you learn from the back country is what you need to make a difference in the front country. Now, I don't have an hour with you, so I'm going to give you an abridged version. It's a passage called Demons and Dust, and I wrote it for a book called This I Believe, Kentucky. It's just a little chapter in the book. And it begins, I have demons, so what? People who have no demons are like people who have no sense of humor. They are dull. I'm highly educated, so I feel no shame in telling teenagers that I rowed a boat alone across the Atlantic Ocean because I was stupid. Most women do not need to row 3,000 miles to figure out that love and friendship are good things. Most women just sort of get that. My personal demon is a sense of helplessness. I have a brother, Lamar. He is intellectually disabled. When we were young, our family moved every 3 or 4 years. New kids on any block are always tested, often teased, and sometimes hazed. Lamar and I were accustomed to all 3. I always tried to protect my brother, but I was not always successful. When I was about 12, Lamar and I were getting to know and to be known at a new playground. I was playing basketball. Lamar was standing in his usual place at the edge of the action. A boy picked up a rock and threw it at my brother. As the boy reached out to pick up a second rock, I tackled him. I disappeared into a swirl of fists and feet. Strong hands pulled me off the boy and hauled him away for questioning. The judge and jury that afternoon was a boy named Eric Fee. Eric would have been about 12 years old. Lamar and I were accustomed to finding ourselves at the center of neighborhood controversies, but they never turned out well for us. I had read about justice, but I had never actually seen it in action. Then something inexplicable happened. Eric Fee hauled the rock-throwing boy over to my brother Lamar and made him apologize. I could hardly believe my ears. Once the apology was complete, Eric called all the children on the playground into a circle. Eric explained that my brother could not defend himself. He declared that Lamar was to be left alone. If anyone taunted or teased Lamar, Eric would settle the score. Someone asked about me. Eric glanced in my direction and said, I think she can take care of herself. By his actions, a 12-year-old boy created peace and justice out of thin air. I watched compassion finish ahead of competition. I went out and followed Eric's example as much as I could and as often as I could. With each passing year, I grew wiser, more competent, and more powerful. But no matter how hard I tried, I could not make justice perfect. I could not make it reliable. Time after time, I found myself jousting with injustices that were too big for me to tackle. Each time the helplessness wore me down, I settled for doing something easy, like climbing a tall mountain, skiing across a frozen continent, or rowing a boat alone across the ocean. Eventually, I came to understand that I could bicycle to the moon, but it would not make me any less human. We are, each of us, a blend, an amalgam of dust and divinity. The dust is essential. It is our brokenness, our helplessness, which makes us human. I believe that love and friendships are the things that make our humanity bearable. Each of us is mortal, and like Eric Fee, each of us is capable of being heroic. We need not accept realities that are not in tune with our hearts. We may not succeed in stealing fire from heaven, but the majesty of humanity lies in our willingness to keep trying. So I could end right there and just tell you that if I ruled the world, there would be more Eric Fees in it. But then the questions would go on for a really long time. So on Monday, that's sort of an abridged version of my Governor's Scholars speech. Monday evening, as I was packing up to leave the Governor's Scholars, one of the scholars came up and said, "So, you used to run a homeless shelter." I said, "Yeah, I ran a homeless shelter at 32nd and Broadway in Louisville right after Divinity School." Then he looked at me and he said, "But now you're a university president." I was like, wow, I love teenagers because they'll just come right up and punch you in the nose, right? He was calling me a sellout. Feeling defensive, I said, "I'm the president of Spalding University. I am not the president of Harvard or Yale." He gave me a grudging nod, like maybe I was only half a sellout. Now, when I was in college and university presidents were giants who walked the earth. They were public intellectuals who spoke out on the important issues of the day. But what would this teenager know of these things? A teenager would see presidents in the news covering up for sexual assault and racial inequities on their campuses. They would see presidents taking million-dollar bonuses. They would watch presidents turning a blind eye toward wrongdoing in athletic departments in the hope of maybe winning. Now, I could tell this young man that I stay out of the newspaper. I stay out of the newspaper by following 3 simple rules. Rule number 1, when you are in public, only say things that are kind or positive. Number 2, when you are in public, only do things that are proper. Number 3, unless you are alone and you are a university president, you may be in public. The steering committee for action on Louisville's agenda, better known as SCALA, asked if I would sign a letter to the editor on the subject of Jefferson County Public Schools. I declined to do so because I did not want my name in the newspaper. This made me feel spineless and small. After all, what is the proper role for university presidents? Henry Riston, a former president of Brown University, wrote that a university president should speak continuously in words that charm and never offend, take bold positions with which no one will disagree, consult everyone and follow all of the proffered advice, and do everything through committees, but with great speed and without error. All true. Clark Kerr, former president of the University of California, noted that a president must be a friend to the students, a sound administrator with the trustees, a good speaker with the public, an astute bargainer with the state legislature, a friend of industry, labor, and agriculture, a persuasive diplomat with donors, a champion of education, a supporter of the professions, particularly medicine and law, a spokesperson to the press, a scholar in his own right, a public servant at the state and national levels, a devotee of opera and football equally, a good husband and father, an active member of a church, a person who enjoys traveling in airplanes and eating his meals in public. All of these things are true. Donald Kennedy, former president of Stanford University, wrote, "There is a powerful temptation to engage in the politics of self-preservation, which most often turns out to be the politics of caution." Ouch. When I first took the job at Spalding, I didn't need to be cautious because we didn't have anything to lose. Frank Rhodes, the former president of Cornell, observed, "Busy with this, preoccupied with that, distracted by a dozen pressing issues, presidents develop an inner emptiness and a personal hollowness." This inner emptiness is real, and it is dangerous. If it were not for McClure, I would have left the presidency at Spalding years ago. Matter of fact, I can look around this room and point out people who saved me and the job. Gene West, Carl Thomas. That probably could pick out one person at each table who at one point mentored me into staying. Mac has inspired me to stick with it and to give Spalding my very best, because our students deserve nothing less. The leaders who founded the school that became Spalding University and those who followed have been fighting the good fight for more than 200 years. Our mission statement begins with these words: Spalding University is a diverse community of learners dedicated to meeting the needs of the times. I love that opening. The times change, and if we are to meet the needs of the times, we must change. I am the president of Spalding University, not Harvard or Yale. To meet the needs of the time, Spalding cannot settle for teaching elite students to become more elite. We must care about creating social mobility for students who want to change the world, who want to change the world for the better. Spalding is a diverse community of learners. When Ivy League universities talk about diversity on their campuses, they are talking about how many international students they have. According to the US Census, 14% of the US population is African American. I select this minority group because of the historic and present-day oppression of African Americans in this community and in our nation. At Harvard, which has an endowment of $38 billion, the African American student population in the undergraduate program is 6%. At Princeton, with an endowment of $22 billion, African Americans make up 7% of the undergraduate population. At Yale, with an endowment of $26 billion, African Americans make up 6% of the undergraduate population. At Spalding University, with an endowment of $20 million, small, but it's at an all-time high, our undergraduate student population of African Americans is 20%. And in the and in our graduate programs, it's 17%. You could barely find graduate students at Harvard, Princeton, and Yale that aren't, anyway, skip that part. Spalding supports, like, only be this snarky. Otherwise you'll end up in the newspaper. Spalding supports social mobility. Harvard, Princeton, and Yale, maybe not so much. Now, I went to divinity school at Harvard. One of my best friends liked to say, "This is Harvard. This is as good as it gets. It doesn't get any better than this." In those days, Harvard, Princeton, and Yale represented the top of the heap. Even today, they're not particularly interested in changing the world. They like the heap just the way it is. They want to preserve the status quo. At Spalding, our vision is a little closer to the ground. We can see very clearly that the status quo is not meeting the needs of the times. At Spalding, we have this crazy idea that the promise of this nation, liberty, equality, justice, and fair opportunity for all, is supposed to be open for all Americans, not just a chosen few, who attend highly selective schools that cost $1 gazillion, where the passports of privilege are reserved for a narrow segment of humanity that already has it pretty good. Our corporate counsel is sitting in the front row. I can hear her saying, "You said that out loud." Now, you already know I'm a traitor to my class. After all, I married Mac. We kind of go together. I've got some breaking news for you. When a privileged person betrays that privilege by spending time and worrying about other people, we should not write negative editorials about them. We should applaud them. So, in the 1990s, an evolutionary biologist at Purdue University wanted to improve the egg production in chickens. So this researcher, Dr. William Muir, selected two groups of chickens. One group, a normal flock, I can hear folks giggling because you've probably seen a TED Talk on this subject, was a normal flock of chickens which produced an average number of eggs. The second group was made up of what have come to be called super chickens. These chickens were the top egg producers from other flocks brought together in a kind of super flock. At the end of the experiment, the control group of normal chickens was producing more eggs than they had originally. The group of super chickens was reduced to 3 hyper-aggressive hens who had pecked all the other chickens to death. The best colleges in the nation collect super chickens from all over the world. Faculty morale at Spalding is pretty good. Even in the dark days when I first started, the faculty would look at their paychecks and they'd say, "Hey, she made payroll." These are way better now. We don't have those fears anymore, and now they think about how they can build excellence. At Harvard, the faculty morale has been bad for, about a century. Those super chickens look at their paychecks and they say, "This place has $38 billion, where's mine?" To keep academic super chickens from pecking each other to death, they are segregated into pens that we call academic departments. It's amazing how they stay in their pens, even if there aren't any fences. At the top of the pecking order are the left brain scientists, mathematicians, and others who engage in strictly rational linear thinking. A little lower down the food chain, we have the humanities, a little left brain, a little right brain. Next come just the right brain people, the musicians and the artists. A little lower down the academic slope, we have people who combine the right brain and the body, oh horror, in drama and dance. At the bottom of the super chicken pecking order are the people who combine left brain with right brain and heart and hand. These are the sort of faculty we have at Spalding. These people actually care about other human beings more than they care about feathering their own nests. Yeah, that was out loud too. Here we will find the divinity students, the social workers, the mental health professionals who do not dispense pills, and, oh my goodness, classroom teachers. I fear that this flawed model of education may be responsible for much of the civic atrophy of our time. We educate individuals and activists instead of citizens and idealists. Individuals and activists see only isolated problems: environmental degradation, drought, famine, war, terrorism, refugees and other human displacement issues, pandemics, poverty, lack of educational opportunity, discrimination, inequity. Activists identify small problems that they can measure and that they can change, because if you can't measure it and show that you are changing the measure, you will not get funding. I should know where I'm going after that, but I'm going to turn the page anyway. Citizens and idealists understand that problems are interconnected and that genuine solutions require serious collaboration. Idealists tend to be positive and optimistic, what gives us such a bad reputation. Idealists are good citizens who understand that if our community is not a decent place for all of us to live in, it won't be a great place for any of us to live in. Great citizens are idealists who show compassion toward others. They provide stability in the present, and they create hope for the future, and build trust by showing themselves to be worthy of that trust. I have hope in the future because I work at Spalding University. Our students give me hope, and as a president, it is my job to give it back to them. Young people today have less respect for the pecking order or hierarchies because those structures no longer meet the needs of our time. Students with smartphones have access to data and information that demonstrates to them that human wisdom and intelligence does not live in pens. It does not exist in isolation. They can see the full breadth and measure of human imagination and ingenuity, and they know it is neither static nor fixed. Young people today think and work collaboratively. They communicate in groups. Disagreement is not a sign of discord. Disagreement is a sign of thinking. We should encourage thinking. I'm an educator, all for it. When I talk to students, I encourage them to seek out differing points of view. We've divided things for too long: left brain, right brain, and in our actual brains, there's a corpus callosum that connects the two hemispheres. We have Democrats, we have Republicans. Citizenship requires a corpus callosum to bridge the things that divide us. If we refuse to speak to people with whom we disagree, if we only communicate with people who look, act, and think like we do, we are participating in a system that is beginning to look like a civic lobotomy. We are better than that. I know we're better than that because I'm the president of Spalding University. Young people give me hope because they're building bridges that we didn't even know we needed. If I ruled the world, I would require every rancid, mean-spirited, and adversarial voice to offer a logical and positive solution to go with every one of his or her rants. If I ruled the world, we would honor people who seek good in others, who search out hallowed ground that we can share with strangers, who see the worth and dignity of every person. I would add animals and the environment, but I have learned that if you give people the option of caring about animals or the environment over caring about each other, they're going to choose the animals and the environment every time. We would honor people who believe in words like honor, duty, and community, and we would know that character matters. It may not be possible for us to solve every problem that we face in this community, but I'm here to tell you, if we don't face our problems, we're not going to solve them. If we face our problems together as idealistic citizens, we would become a powerful force for good in the world. If I ruled the world, I would look upon the seeds of each new generation and hold fast to the kind of willful optimism that feeds miracles. If I ruled the world, I would give the next generation a reason to hope, a reason to believe, a reason to trust, and enough reason to change the world.
Tori, that's fabulous. Thank you. You're here as president of Spalding, so fill us in on projects and progress that you've been most pleased with as we ended the last academic year.
Well, we've been on a great run at Spalding. Since I've been president, we've doubled the size of campus and paid down our debt. We like to brag that we have more cash than debt on the balance sheet, which is always a good thing. New academic programs are flourishing. We're beginning to start a program in criminal justice reform. Former Mayor Jerry Abramson is going to be assisting us with that. And it'll be a really interdisciplinary effort. We'll have social workers and psychologists and teachers and all sorts of folks working on it, because we gotta let the chickens, whether they're super or not, out of the pens. Mm-hmm. Because the best thinking is across those divides. Mm-hmm. And so I'm so excited, and we've got such wonderful, caring, heart-filled people. I mean, there are head counts that matter, but heart counts matter too. Mm-hmm.
Years ago, I took some psychology classes at Spalding, and to this day, one of my favorite all-time teachers was one of your faculty members, Dr. David Morgan.
Yeah. And
just a fabulous command of knowledge, but that connection and that focus on character was always there. Yeah. Questions, anyone? Do you have any questions for us, Tori?
Well, I was expecting somebody to ask me to take a stand on the JCPS issue, so I made notes.
But your goal is to stay out of the newspaper.
My goal is to stay out of the newspaper, but I'm kind of worried that we're having this great big brouhaha over the wrong stuff. We're having an argument about command and control, and not having an argument about how to help teachers build that relationship with the students in their classrooms. Our teachers need greater autonomy. They need to be able to meet the needs of students. We're living in an educational system that was built in the industrial age. It's an assembly line where we try to give the same information to the same group of students at the same time, and it's too slow for some, and it's too fast for others, and it doesn't work for most of them. And we test our students in April, and the teachers don't get the results until summer, when it's too late for the group they're teaching. I know that JCPS is working on making sure that the next teacher gets information on the students, but I mean, I was with a gentleman from JCPS last week, and he said, and it breaks my heart because it's so true, he goes, while we're waiting for the data that will tell us what we already know, ... And we know what's wrong. What are we changing? And we know why young people drop out. Mm-hmm. The conversations we're having about who's in charge is not going to solve any of those issues.
So as parents of an 18-year-old who will be entering college next year, we think we understand, but we don't fully understand. How are today's incoming college freshmen, you alluded to it in your remarks, how are they different from a generation ago? What do we need to know as in the future we'll be employing them, as we'll be side by side with them, as we're teaching them?
Yeah, I know that some of us older generation get kind of miffed at them, and that's been true throughout history. I mean, you can pull up Greek theologians who say kids today are no good, and they tell you why. And but I'm really excited about the young people who are coming up, and it's true that they really, I don't understand hierarchy, so I kind of like that they don't understand hierarchy, and they voice opinions as if they think they're in charge, and that really upsets those of us who care about hierarchy. It's not that they think they're in charge, they think their opinion should matter. And it should. They have access to all sorts of data and information on that little cell phone, and they may not have the wisdom that you have. Coach them. But that ability to collaborate, that ability to communicate with one another en masse, has such power for good. And please, let's not regress to several generations ago where it became all about me and my stuff and my things. They're not about that, and that's a good sign.
Tori, thank you. Tori Murden, McClure. Okay, guests, remember that we have a What is Rotary table. Tom Crimmins is right there. He's making a beeline to the table. And our meeting, before I bang the bell to adjourn us, our Rock and Rotary Band has one more song to perform. It is the Keith Whitley, Allison Krauss duet, When You Say Nothing at All. We are adjourned.